What are cost curves?
I know you often find yourself frustrated, sleepless in the middle of the night, pondering the meaning of cost curves. Well, here today we have Mr. Potts to explain it to us.
Sure, yeah, okay. I can teach you about cost curves.
Guys, so, this is the cost table for a firm. Here is the quantity output. Here we have the fixed cost, which is the same little time. Here we have the variable cost, which increases, and the marginal cost, which shows how much the variable cost increased by. It goes down and then comes back up. The total cost, which is the fixed cost of the variable cost. The average fixed cost, which is the fixed cost over the quantity output. The average variable cost, which is the variable cost over the quantity output. And the average total cost, which is the total cost, price over the quantity output. Hey, so, this is the cost curves. This is what it would look like for that firm. As you can see, the marginal cost is U-shaped. This is because marginally your costs fall as you add a certain number of workers, because of course, that's more efficient. Think back to when we made the links. But eventually you get to the point where the law of diminishing returns outweighs any kind of benefits of adding more workers or whatever variable that you are manipulating, doesn't have to be workers, and your marginal costs rise. Then you have your average variable cost, which also has its lowest point where it intersects the marginal cost. Think back to that later, because when we get to the average total cost here, it also has its lowest point when it intersects the marginal cost. Now, the ATC is shaped like a U, kind of like the marginal cost, due to two effects. So it begins to decrease because the spreading effect, that is the effect caused by the fact that the average fixed cost curve always is falling, because of course, if you have 100, it's going to get divided by a larger and larger number as you have more quantity output. So that effect, the spreading effect, causes it to fall initially, but eventually that effect is outweighed by the diminishing returns effect, wherein in order to produce one more quantity output, your costs rise way more than they did before. That's the marginal cost rising. And so the rising of the marginal cost eventually causes the average total cost to rise, and that is why that is U-shaped. So, let's get started about the long run. Now, whenever you see long run, think to scale or of scale, because in the long run, remember, there are no fixed inputs. So here we have the long run cost curves for a firm, and so here we have cost, quantity output, and this is the LRATC, this one right here, and it is essentially the average total cost curve for the long run. Now, each of these three ATCs, I have labeled ATC 1, 2, and 3, are short run cost curves with different levels of fixed cost. So ATC 1 has the lowest, ATC 2 is higher, ATC 3 is even higher. And so each of these three cost curves intersect the LRATC at different points. And that is because in the long run, of course, fixed costs are actually variable. And so these are representative of the variation of fixed costs at three different points. Now here, before this point, we are experiencing an economy of scale, wherein as we produce more quantity output, we have our LRATC going down. Here, we are experiencing diseconomies of scale, where as we produce more, we have our LRATC going up. And right here, this horizontal section is constant returns to scale, which means that as we produce more, it does not change our LRATC level. So lastly, we need to talk about sunk costs. So sunk costs are costs that you should not take into account when you are looking at the long run. So let's say that you have a crappy Toyota Prius by domestic kids, and so the brakes on the Toyota Prius break, ironically enough. And so you go and buy new brake pads, and then you test out your car and they do not work. Well, you've already bought the brake pads, so they are a sunk cost when you go into the dealer and you decide to get the entire transmission fixed. Because you have already bought new brakes, so they do not go into account when you decide to say, hey, am I going to fix the car, or am I going to go to the wrecker? So have you learned?
Yes.